Right, just kicking things off. I'm going to start with you, Isaiah. There's a lot of misconceptions about getting started in cybersecurity, but how would you best talk to students interested in getting into the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that I'd find what your interest is specifically. So cybersecurity, it's a broad field, very broad. There's many jobs that fall under the cybersecurity umbrella. So I'd try to find some entry level jobs that suit your interests, and then try to build your career based on that.
Would anyone else from the panel have any other recommendations to students getting started, especially those that may think that they don't have a technical background that is required to get into the field? Happy to hear from anyone else.
So I definitely came from a point of where I had absolutely no technical background. I would say a really great career path for people, especially just graduating at UK. If you're interested in sales, going more in the business development representative side, they love people who have no experience and just the desire to work hard. And within about 18 months, you can be making six figures easily.
I'll also add from my perspective, I came from a little bit more of a marketing and communications background, but also having those skills from my master's degree focused on behavior change is very critical in growing awareness and in the field and teaching people behaviors that they should have, that preventative action that they should take, the phishing emails and all of that. And so it really depends on what you want to do and what angle you have, but thinking about those transferable skills, what are those things that you learn that could lend themselves to any of these different fields? And pursuing internships, even if you're a working professional and want to pivot, talking with leaders and networking and getting some time on teams to learn about the various fields is very helpful.
And yeah, to piggyback off that, I'd say always be willing to learn new things. So I'd say sometimes you get locked into focusing on one thing and then trying to just steer your career towards that way. But one thing I would do is to always be curious, always question why things are the way they are, and then that'll help you gain more knowledge into the overall field.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you guys. And just to echo a lot of these sentiments, I mean, like when I started in the field, we didn't have any kind of cybersecurity degree. So, first, what I would recommend to people looking is figure out what you want to do. If you want to do something a bit more technical, you want to do software or like red teaming or the more technical, less client-facing roles, is maybe consider trying to get some of those certifications or looking for job descriptions to line up your skills according to what those roles will require. And for me, like in the example of cyber threat intelligence, it's very focused on being able to write well, synthesize large amounts of material into concise and very blunt, to the point synthesis, looking at like a geopolitical lens as well as like if it comes from Russia or versus Iran, what does that mean for national security? So having those kind of skills like political science or having an English degree, being able to write pairs well with a cyber threat intelligence degree, whereas it may not be suited for like a more technical role. So I would say, looking at what you maybe are more inclined to like in terms, you don't have to figure out exactly the role that you want, but maybe just picking a first starting position that you could get your foot in the door and get that experience. Like a security operations center would also be a really great beginning position. It's honestly where I started, and you're able to work usually for like these larger cyber companies that have a security operations center or SOC. They'll provide you training, and then you're able to kind of find your footing to pivot into a different area that you're better suited for in cyber.
Alex, this is Amy. I've got a lot of great questions in the chat. The first one that I wanted to ask is regarding internships. Is it possible to get into an internship with little experience in programming or little to no knowledge about cybersecurity? So I'll throw that out to the panel.
I can maybe take a first stab at this one. as someone who has both done internships at Microsoft and also interviewed candidates for internships, I think it's important to remember that when we look at internship candidates, we know that you're a student. We know that you may be very early in your learning career, or you may be a little bit further along. But regardless, we're not looking for a wealth of knowledge and experience. We know that you're going to learn over time. We know that you're going to learn on the job. And so, since we don't expect you to have all this experience, what we're really looking for is mindset and attitude, and that willingness and desire to learn. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can demonstrate that. One thing that I always recommend is, I like to see a candidate who has shown an interest in learning and building their skills outside of the classroom. So if you can do side projects, security is a huge field, and we sort of are at a perfect time where AI and ChatGPT is $20 a month away from anyone. And so it's a booming field. It's something that even the professionals haven't learned a lot about. So if you're interested in that, and you can go get a ChatGPT subscription and sort of do your own research and experimentation on AI and how that might affect the cybersecurity industry, if you can show up to an internship interview and talk about that experience, you're going to be a really, really desirable candidate. So that would be my advice for getting into an internship without any, prior knowledge or experience.
Again, a lot of great questions. Thank you for that, Greg. Another general question: how is the market for cybersecurity trainers for organizations?
I can go ahead and answer this one because it kind of depends on what kind of budget, first of all, you would have for any kind of training. So with like SANS courses, and I actually responded to one of these in the chat as well, SANS can be a little bit more on the pricey side. So, I mean, we're talking like 10,000 minimum for a certification. So I always suggest trying to get an employer to pay for one of these. Sometimes a lot of these larger consulting companies, if you start with like a Booz Allen, Deloitte, PwC, Accenture, they may have these certification tickets that they will be able to help you for any kind of SANS certification. For any kind of like trainer, I would look for more, recognized and reputable organization. CompTIA is a great one that is nationally recognized, but a lot of times, and I've seen plenty of these, they'll say like cybersecurity boot camp. I would always recommend looking into the reputation of the trainers. I would say go with someone that's more recognized, because a lot of times they will claim to have the curriculum that maybe like won't be recognized by your company and what you need to show on paper, or that doesn't provide the most up-to-date curriculum.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Continue on.
All right. Were there any other thoughts before we move ahead? I don't know if we've had any more in the chat as well.
There's one that I'd like to talk to. There was a question about what degree is most attractive. And traditionally, you would think computer science degree, but I think it really matters on what kind of work you want to get into. If you want to get into doing things like cybersecurity training, doing education, awareness campaigns, things like that, a marketing degree might be great. If you want to go into privacy, a law degree might be great. So it really just depends. It's a very wide field, and it doesn't have to be just a traditional computer science degree going into it.
It looks like we have a couple other questions, so I'll ask couple more that just came in. What kind of companies look for, this was Russian speakers and majors, but let's maybe discuss if anyone can speak to how language skills can be applied in the cybersecurity industry and how that may be, advantageous to be bilingual.
Yeah, I can maybe start on this one. I think, Alex, you already mentioned this, but, geopolitical knowledge and like context of what's going on in the world is really important in cyber, especially in the field that I'm in threat intelligence. We need people who are proficient in languages that are used by both threat actors as well as victims of cyber attacks in those regions. And so, we're in an age where digital translation technology is abundant. But there's still always value in having a person on your team who can bring language skills to the table and help you better understand like the context and the true meaning behind language. So I would say Russian speakers are definitely needed in threat intelligence and in many cybersecurity positions in government. And I'm sure there's other sectors across the field that would benefit from those skills as well.
Looks like we have another additional question before we can move on to the next slide. Do you all have any suggestions for online resources or different courses for different areas of cybersecurity?
Yeah, I do. So O'Reilly.com, it's an online, think of it as a collection of books and just, we'll say, pre-recorded instructional videos. It's roughly, I think it's 30 or 40 bucks a month, but it has thousands of books that you can use to study on just about any topic that you need. And they'll give you a free trial as well, so you can try it out, see if you like it, and then make your judgment from there. But that's what I use religiously.
And just one additional comment just before we pivot onto the next slide. Also, a lot of vendors, you could sign up for their newsletters. Then you're going to get free education and free insights to what are the recent cyber threats, what are the different like campaigns, threat actors being profiled. All of that will come for free email subscription, or you can check out SANS.org. They're kind of like the gold standard of a lot of certifications and news in the cybersecurity industry. There's summits that are free. So a lot of these are free resources that you can get a lot of knowledge from. And that's SANS, SANS.org. It's a great institution. But I'm just going to keep it moving onto the next slide just so we can open it up to a new section, and I'll check the chat for any other questions. So in the day-to-day, there's a lot of pressure, as we all know. Cybersecurity keeps changing. There's a lot of new threats. It's a very relatively new industry. I'm just going to open this up to the panel and see, what do you all think is the most difficult or intimidating part of your job?
I'd say staying up to date with all the emerging technologies. I'd say each day, each week, each month, there's tens to 20s of hundreds of new vendors that pop up that offer this specific technology. I'd say just staying up to date on what's going on and then the current emerging threats. That's the hardest part to do for me.
Along those same lines, I think for me, the most intimidating part of my job is also my favorite. And that is, I never really know what each day is going to bring at work. There's this constant need to react to what the threat actors are going to do. And while a big part of my job is certainly, researching and trying to forecast what they might do, there's always a nature of, the work being unexpected. And so I enjoy that because it keeps things interesting and dynamic, but it's also really hard and kind of scary because you can't ever really be fully prepared for what a day might bring.
All right, we can move on to the next question. What is everyone's favorite aspect of cybersecurity? Like, if I could just get kind of a quick answer from everyone about what do you enjoy about your job and working in the field?
I'll tag on a little bit to what Greg said in my incident management capacity. Every day is a little bit unpredictable, and I like that there's variability in what I do. Sometimes it stinks a little bit when you're trying to plan your day or accomplish work, but being able to tag in and get to know various team members across different knowledge bases is a wonderful experience, and to be able to be helpful and help people recover when there's an incident going on. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, I would say
Sorry,
go ahead. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Susan.
A colleague of mine likes to refer to it as the ultimate team sport. And really and truly, I can't think of too many other disciplines where you interface with organizations, universities outside of your own, if you work in a university like me, government agencies, groups like CISA, that does a lot of support for both federal infrastructure, but also support for infrastructure kind of at large. You're all on the same team. You're all kind of fighting the same bad guys. So our ability to collaborate and work together, sponsor each other, help each other, I do see a lot of that great positive collaboration happening. That is a lot of fun.
And then, so I was going to piggyback off of what Jennifer said. So every day is completely different. That keeps you on your toes. And then there's no finish line for cybersecurity. So every day there's new things being introduced that you're going to have to stay on top of and continuously learn. Continuously learn.
And kind of bouncing off of that, just because every day is so different and you never know what the next day brings, there's a sense of community with the partners that I work with where, and typically in sales, nobody likes working well with everybody, but with cybersecurity, everybody has the same common goal to help ensure that everybody's protected. So it's just been so much fun that people genuinely care about other people as well.
I also love all the really, really smart people in this industry. Like everyone is super driven. Everyone is like super motivated by the mission of, keeping the world safe. And it's just really awesome to get to work together with so many brilliant people who all share a common set of goals.
Yeah, I guess for me, I like that every single day is something new. There's not a whole lot of history. Like in the medical field, there's, hundreds of years of information about different activities and documentation on all, the different health advancements along the way. But each day, these threat actors are changing tactics and using different types of tools and lures. And there's also a human element as well. You're only as safe as the weakest link there. So I think there's just so many different parts and there's always something that is changing and different threats emerging. So I think it's always new and neat to be on the frontier of things. Just moving on to the next question. What coding languages do you all use at your company? And if you do not or are not on that side of things, maybe what are the more technical training options that you could get into it if offered and of any at your company?
So for me, there are two. The first one is KQL, which stands for Kusto Query Language. And I happen to know a really good training platform for learning KQL that I will make a shameless plug for. That is the nonprofit that I'm involved with. It's called KC7 Cyber. I'll put the link in chat, kc7cyber.com. It's a great way not only to learn KQL, but also just in general to get hands-on experience with what we call the blue team side of cyber, which is all about defense and learning to protect people and protect organizations. So KC7 Cyber is free. I think it's a lot of fun. Lots of people around the world who've played it also think it's a lot of fun. So go check it out. So the first one is KQL. The second one is Python. We do lots of data analysis and data manipulation, and Python is pretty good for that. But I'll say overall, I'm a big believer in the idea that it doesn't really matter what programming language you know, or even if you know a programming language. The skills from programming that I think are most useful in cyber is just the ability to think in a structured way and kind of break a problem down analytically. So no matter what language you know, or even if you're just learning a language now, I think it's the way that you learn to think when you study programming that makes you a better cybersecurity practitioner.
And I can provide a little bit of information for my company is a cyber threat intelligence company. We have people that don't use coding at all in the day-to-day. They are researchers, they are analysts, linguists, and then we have others that are doing more of the malware reverse engineering and looking at what type of malware does what and breaking it down. That would require knowing various different languages such as C#, HTML, Python, etc. So that would just be very dependent on, what type of malware or what type of language the malware uses. So if you're looking to get into something like that, I would suggest, looking at languages, but there's plenty of other roles that don't explicitly require it. I would always recommend, being able to have some kind of familiarity with like basic scripting. That's going to help you go the long way of making your life easier, and also just putting your foot in the door to building your technical skills. I'm going to move on to the next one. What can you expect if you enter cybersecurity? Like, what does starting your career in the field really look like?
The best analogy I can use is drinking from the fire hose. At first it's so you'll learn a lot coming from UK, but as soon as you get into the industry, you're going to see a lot more things that you haven't seen before, and just being willing to not know everything, but being willing to find an answer. That's what I recommend, and so drinking from the fire hose is the best analogy I can give.
Going off of what you're saying, Isaiah, it's totally drinking from the fire hose, and it's learning one thing each day. It gets super overwhelming because there's thousands of things for you to learn. It's much easier to just learn one thing, master something, and then go on from there. A lot less overwhelming.
Just to kind of sum this up before we maybe move on to the next slide, there's always this notion that a lot of people working in cybersecurity have the option to work remotely and live anywhere in the world. Was it always like that? Do you think it's going to stay like that? Like, what are your all's thoughts there?
Just being in sales, I do recommend anybody who's new to sales try to find a position that is in person. You just learn so much more by hearing the language of your peers on there. And then you can find a remote position. But I've seen a lot of places in the cybersecurity industry actually start going back into the office over the past 6 months, I'd say.
The majority of my team works remote, and I think that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. I don't know that I would be able to recruit if I limited myself to a geographical area to recruit from.
And yeah, just to echo that before we open it up on women in cyber, I certainly did not start my career working remotely, although it is super nice to be able to do that. But I definitely recommend, if you're just getting started, definitely work on site. It's so helpful to learn just working next to someone, like a security operations center. A lot of those jobs are also on site. So, at least try to get some on-site component, because it really does help you learn just so much more. But thank you all so much for your thoughts and your comments on this slide before moving on to the women in cyber portion of today's discussion. Kelly, I'll start with you. How do you manage working in a career field that is predominantly male?
Absolutely. So when I first started my cybersecurity career, I was the first female hire of a small startup with about 20 people. And over the next year and a half, I watched our company grow to about 150 people, where all of the leaders of our department were actually the majority females. I think it's been super interesting with the cybersecurity industry, where it's more so based off of your skill set with everything, versus anything else. I would say the one thing, that I would be mindful of if you are a female is if people are direct to you, try not to take it personally. And then if there is anything that does make you upset, like just address it immediately, because it's usually just a simple miscommunication.
Yeah, I think for me, there's also this kind of imposter syndrome that women tend to feel in the industry. So we always feel that we're not going to be taken seriously, or that we aren't as technical. And I think that's just a characteristic that a lot of women feel more so than men. Men tend to be more risk takers, and women tend to be a little bit more guarded and cautious when it comes to speaking at events or saying that they know something. So I think it's just getting over that imposter syndrome. And also, it's so nice that there are so many different women in cyber networking events and groups that you can join. I myself am a a part of, I want to say about like 4 or 5, and there's some, I know the University of Kentucky probably has a lot of different resources for that. And whether you're looking at joining a virtual group, there's like WeSys, and I'll make sure to post that in the chat. Women in Cybersecurity is a great organization to be a part of, and they do a lot of virtual events. So some of these networking events that are geared towards women can actually help you overcome a lot of those questions, the imposter syndrome, and also open the door to a lot of different training, some scholarships, and other opportunities. And then to also round out this slide, Kelly, between you and myself, I think we've seen a lot of different careers that are more flexible and ones that maybe women are more inclined to take. Maybe you could speak about any of these careers, like you being in sales, how these careers are maybe more advantageous or, promising for women to try to look to get into.
100%. Yeah, I can definitely talk about women in sales, where I actually think we have an advantage because women more often have a stronger emotional intelligence. And so when I'm talking to a prospect on a call, they don't have to tell me if they're hesitant about, moving forward with our product. I can typically sense that and address it on the call, where, sometimes, that does help me close a lot of deals much faster because I'm able to address things immediately versus letting them fester. I've also seen a lot of females really great in sales operations as well, just on the sales side. Just the organization, the ideas, the creativity makes for somebody really successful in that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then kind of like maybe on the intel and the analytical side of cyber, there is a huge value in diversity of thought and just being able to look at something in a different way. So I think that's also much more enticing for women to try to get into, because they are contributing a different opinion. Like, you're looking at an attack vector in a completely different way than, say, like the rest of your team that may be male and have learned a certain way. So I would say, don't just write off, an IT career because you think it's going to be very male dominated. There are a ton of different opportunities. And I think, we're testament to that it's really a great field to get into. And there are, I would say, a lot more remote opportunities, which I think women also tend to prefer. So not all, but, there are more remote. And then there are a lot of different, like, women in cyber networking and scholarship events that really can make the difference in making your career. But I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And Stephen, if you don't mind, I'll start with you on this one. Certifications are always raised as a really important aspect that people think that they need in cybersecurity. What are your thoughts on certifications, and what ones would you recommend for students looking to obtain one?
And I'll kind of attack this from 2 angles. Certainly, I want to talk about certifications because I think it's a great way for people to break into the field and continue to grow and develop in the field. But also, I want to talk a little bit about what I think organizational responsibilities are to the employees who are trying to grow their career. So certainly, I'm a fan. I mentioned it earlier when I was doing my introduction. If you're going to go into leadership in cybersecurity, I think the CISSP is really almost a requirement at this point. A great entry into that is the Certified in Cybersecurity program by the same certifying body, ISC Squared. I believe that's still free. You just carry an annual maintenance fee of like $25 or $50 annually for having that. But it's a really good way to kind of break into the field and then over the course of 5 years, move towards that larger one. If you're not looking at attracting leadership, I really love the SANS courses. You do probably need corporate sponsorship for those because they are quite expensive. But I think that they're really well put together. They're thought, the materials are great. The tests, I think, are, they evaluate your ability to follow the material really, really well. So certainly a fan of those, but there are others out there too. What I really focus on as a manager for my team is making sure that we foster that culture of growth. So how do we make getting certified easy? So how do we pay for it? How do we give you time on the clock? How do we help you be successful there? And then we also do things to try and support those employees once they've gotten certified. So we don't want people to go and get a certification and then 3 years later not keep the certification because there's an annual maintenance fee that comes up, or you've got continuing education units that you've got to fulfill, and those can be real obligations, particularly if you have several certifications. So trying to find time to give people on the clock continued education? How do we sponsor people to go to a conference where they can get CEUs, learn something, and bring that back? And then how do we cover the cost of renewals and the like? And one thing I would challenge candidates as you're out there talking to folks, when you talk to, or you're in an interview, they always ask that question: what questions do you have for us? I would propose you ask a question around what that company does to sponsor your development and growth. How would they help you get certified, stay certified, grow your skills, grow your career while you're there? And I think it'll be a really telling response from them, how much they support and want that culture of growth, and how they respond to your question.
I think that is super important. And for me also, Stephen, I had started at Booz Allen Hamilton that paid for a lot of those first training sessions and certifications. It really does depend on, where you're trying to go into. I would recommend looking at the job descriptions for the jobs you want to have and then tailor what you're looking for based on that. That way it's going to give you a clear path. Security plus, network plus, those are going to be really good for overall industry base knowledge, that jargon. You're going to be able to have more fluent conversations and be able to understand when people are using certain acronyms. So I'd say regardless of where you're trying to go, more technical or less, that Security Plus or Network Plus, those are two good ones. And then to get more specialized, whether it's CISSP or any kind of more hacking focus, blue team, purple team, red team, whatever your focus is, go and search for like 5-10 job descriptions, look and see what they require, and then kind of pivot from there. So another question I want to raise that I think a lot of us also see, we get a lot of these offers from boot camps, training sessions. People want to know, are they worth it? They cost thousands of dollars sometimes. What is the ROI on that? So just want to open that up to the panel and see if anyone has any thoughts.
I would just do research on the boot camps that you're interested in. There are some boot camps that they offer you pretty much everything that you're looking for, and then there's others that offer you not quite what you're looking for. They're more just trying to get your money. So I would do some research, find 2 or 3 that you're interested in, look at the reviews, and then base your decision off that.
And I would say from a hiring manager perspective, sometimes it's hard for hiring managers to assess the quality of those boot camps. It's a lot easier to fall back and look at things like certifications where we kind of know what those are. So if you're looking at a boot camp, take a look at what the outputs are too. Is that boot camp helping you move toward a certification or a certificate of accomplishment or something along those lines? What can you put on your resume that would really show and stand out to a hiring manager?
I think from my end, it's when you're able to demonstrate the ROI, if it's more clear cut, like, do you know certain coding languages? I would say that boot camp would be worth it. If it's something a little more on the soft skills and more difficult, as Stephen said, to quantify the value, I would really reassess maybe the reputation and the certification recognition within the industry. So, whether it's just do you know this? If you can take a boot camp or a training program, I think then it's certainly something to consider. But, just be cognizant that there are a lot of these. Sometimes they are scams, or sometimes the programs are not as high quality as, say, like an education that you would get at the University of Kentucky or from a reputable program. But I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Regarding student advice. Now, Greg, I'll go ahead and start with you on this one. What advice would you give to a current college student hoping to pursue a career in cyber?
Yeah, I'll piggyback a bit off what I said earlier. And that is, when you're looking for an internship or even an entry-level full-time position, your hiring managers and the people conducting interviews are going to understand that you're early in career. They know that you don't have 5+ years of experience. They know that in the internship case, you may be only a semester into your studies. And so I think it's important not to over fixate on the content and like trying to prove that you're a master of all things cyber, because you're not, and that's not the expectation. What's much more important is showing your mindset and your ability to think and your curiosity and your willingness to learn. Often in interviews for entry level positions, we're really just trying to get a feel for whether you would be a good fit on the team. Are you someone who's going to positively contribute to the culture of the team? Will you be a good teammate that can both learn from your peers and also help them learn from you? And so I think there's loads of things you can do to sharpen those skills. I've mentioned some of them already: side projects, KC7. There's also lots of other great free resources out there. Try HackMe and Hack the Box are two other really good platforms that give you sort of hands-on experience at no cost. And so I think, just keep all that in mind. I think also networking is huge when you're trying to break into the field. Being a college student kind of gives you a free pass to network with anyone. They may not listen, but you can always reach out and say, hey, I'm a student. I want to pursue a career in cybersecurity. Will you give me 30 minutes of your time so I can, better understand what you do and what your team does? And those connections that you make as you're beginning the job search process are going to be really beneficial, whether you land at that organization or others. The cybersecurity industry really is relatively small, and it's pretty well interconnected. And so if you can make a good impression with someone, it may really go a long way.
Now, I don't know about you all, but I sure loved my time at UK. So what do you all think was the most beneficial class that you took? And did this prepare you for where you are at in cyber?
Yeah, I took a grad level course my senior year. It was taught by his last name is Shirali, and it was different than any other course I had taken throughout college. The exams were on paper. You had to show up to every class, and one thing that he focused on was making sure that every student actually knew the material. So he'd constantly call on you in class. He'd have you explain things back to him in your own words. And so, that's like to this day, I tell people about that course because that's something that helped spark my interest in cybersecurity and helped lay that foundation.
I got to include my shout out to Professor Wise here. I took a structured analytical thinking course with him in which I was able to kind of make sense of the madness. So take a lot of different content and then synthesize to what we call bluff in the industry or bottom line up front. And I think that was just absolutely essential for helping my career take off, because it makes you realize you need to analyze the information in a non-biased analytical way to take pieces of information and assign them like qualifiers if you think it's valid or not and how much it should weigh, and then come to a logical conclusion of what the result of an investigation would look like. So that helped me learn to structure how I write these reports and take all this nonsense and turn it into a 1 paragraph or a 1-page memo that I would get in front of someone and make total sense. They would know and be able to hop into a meeting and be able to brief anyone on the topic. So I thought that was absolutely essential. If you could ever take a course like that to structure how you're investigating and you're doing your research, I think it's very beneficial. Just maybe one more question, just to be time sensitive here on this slide. How do I shadow the UK cybersecurity team, or what are the different options at UK for cybersecurity?
So on our team, we do have paid employee positions that typically goes between 4 and 6 positions. And then we also have some unpaid internships. If you're interested, you can send an email to cybersecurity@uky.edu, and then we can follow back up. But also keep an eye on the job boards. Typically leading up to each semester, we will post opportunities as students graduate from our program.
Awesome. No, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Stephen. I will go ahead and move on to the next slide. Regarding getting hired, and Greg, I'll go ahead and start with you here. What can someone with no industry experience do to make themselves a more desirable job candidate?
Yeah, I'll once again double back on my point of side projects and showing that you have sort of that passion and desire to learn. I do think certifications can be useful in this case. It can help you sort of get noticed. And often many jobs have kind of an initial batch of cutting applicants. And sometimes a certification can help you survive that initial cut, especially if it's offered to you for free through school or through an employer. I think you can also, practice interviews. There's a lot of great resources out there, written resources on YouTube, that can help you understand what an interview might look like and how you can respond to different types of questions. And if you have a friend or a colleague or someone in your network who works in the field, ask them if they'd be willing to do a practice interview with you. Almost everyone is. It's an opportunity for us to give back and help someone else be successful. So that can be a great way to help you stand out in the job interview process.
Now, I know interviews are always really stressful for everyone. I mean, it never gets easier. You're always kind of nervous, no matter where you are in your career. So, just opening this up to the panel, what does that interview process look like for you? Like, what are you doing to prepare? What are some standout questions that you can ask to make yourself seem prepared and like you're the right person for the job?
I always encourage people to think about your top 2 to 3 projects or efforts or initiatives that you've done in your career. Now, whether that's classroom based because you don't have much career experience or you've got 20 years of career experience, focus on your top 2 to 3 things that you've accomplished in your career, the role that you've played in those, and how you contributed to those accomplishments, and build a story around each of those because you're going to get hit with lots of questions and folks are really looking at the role you played in those. And so if you have 2 to 3 various projects that you can speak about, it gives you some depth to speak on during your interview.
I think that's really good advice. And one of the things I always encourage people to do is document your story. So actually write them down and then highlight, here's what the problem was. Here's the actions that I took. Here was the result. And maybe even go into, here's what I learned from the process. But write it down, rehearse it, practice it. And when you get maybe a challenging question, if you can work in one of your stories to help explain, and you've practiced it, it'll feel a lot more natural. You'll feel a little bit less nervous because you'll have some answers kind of ready to go.
Yeah, these are all really great pieces of advice. I really appreciate that. I know we've got a lot of questions that have also come in, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep things moving on to the next subject, and we'll see what other kind of questions we can answer at the end. So opinions on the field, and if you don't mind, Stephen, I'll go ahead and start with you on this one. How can we advance the field of cyber? How do we stay ahead? Like, where are the trends going?
So this is one on the management side where I feel like we really have a responsibility to build and develop talent. So there's a shortage of talent, but it's not really on the entry-level side. I think that there's really a gap there of those jobs that are wanting someone that's got 5 years of experience. Well, how do you ever get that job if you don't get those earlier opportunities? So how do we help people transition? How do we help people move into those roles? How do we help build people that have 5 years of experience? So we look at that, and what we try and do is we try and focus on career switchers and career launchers. So a system administrator, a network administrator, someone with a communications background, someone with training experience, somebody that's got good foundational skills, we can help mold. We can provide opportunities for training. We can give experience to work at scale. We can do all those things, but we've got to find a way to do that on the clock in a way that's enriching and a good experience to the employee. I think when you look at kind of those core skills that will help enable all of this, that growth mindset, but really we want to see things like problem solving skills. So when you're working on your stories and you're documenting stories, think about things like that. How have I solved problems? How have I demonstrated customer service skills? How have I shown excellent communication? So even think about that leading up to and through the process, right? Like, how did I introduce myself? What does my cover letter say? What does my thank you note say? Things along those lines. But kind of going back to the guts of this question, I think we who are in the industry have this responsibility to help build the talent. So find the people who are interested in moving over to it, look at what transferable skills they have, and then help them bridge that gap through training, development, support, experience. Let's get a lot of those people again to that kind of like magical 5 year of experience on the resume.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And thank you so much, Stephen. I think also people are very concerned with AI taking their job, or the notion that we're going to be antiquated as analysts or professionals in the cybersecurity industry. But I personally don't think that that is even a possibility. I think it's going to automate a lot of the manual things we do on the day-to-day. It's going to create new jobs. People are going to have to know how to work with AI and machine learning. So it's going to require the field to certainly shift, but it's going to require companies to adapt with it and create new opportunities. So it's more of like figuring out how can you become proficient in harnessing AI in the day-to-day. And absolutely agree and echoing what all you say, for people looking to get into the field, maybe that don't have that experience, it's quantifying what you have done previously and then applying it to cyber. A lot of times they're not looking for doing exactly what the job description requires, but it's, do you possess the skills in order to do that? So have you written reports? Can you synthesize the information? What are the different skills that can be applicable? Because they can teach you the rest, right? They can teach you to analyze that specific cyber threat, but you're going to have the skill set to do so on the job. So really appreciate the thoughts and comments from everyone. Thank you so much. I will pass it over to Jay.